Okay, this is the finale of all the videos on Scott Peterson. This is my wrap up, my case summary, my here's why I have reasonable doubt series. I think this is video 5. Go back and watch the other 4 to get the whole picture. But there's just a couple of things I want to say as part of my closing. Is that one, I would still question in this case, why are the autopsy results sealed? There's a lot of things we could find out if we had the autopsy results. I said a couple of videos ago when I was talking about the evidence, that there wasn't any evidence that maybe Lacey and Connor were really ever in that bay. We know where they were found, but there was no sign of them in the water. And based on the destruction of Lacey's body, and I'm sorry, I should give a trigger warning, there was a lot of pieces of her that were no longer there. It was just a torso, right? So feet, hands, arms, head, neck. There was a lot of things that the animal life got to. We also have heard that this body was also discovered as being cavernous, meaning no internal organs whatsoever. But yet Connor was apparently still inside of her the entire time she was in the water, according to the state's theory. So that his body was, I'll use the word, kind of evacuated from her on its own just a day or two before they both washed up on shore. That might be the case. I don't know because we can't look at the autopsy. But I'm curious if I'm marine life, if I am some sort of critter who is taking part in the destruction of a human body in the water. I'm going after arms and legs and heads and necks and internal organs, but somehow I avoid this baby that's in this womb. That feels a little bit unusual to me, but I am not an expert on marine life. I'm also curious as to why all of the search warrants and all of the affidavits that the police used to get those search warrants and what the judges actually approved for search warrants, that's all under seal. And believe me, an entire army of people have tried to use all kinds of Freedom of Information Act and try to go through the entire court system. Those have remained sealed. There are some things that I think the police very much did wrong in this case. I think there's a lot of witnesses that weren't followed up on. There's a lot of leads that could have led to a different story, or maybe Scott wasn't acting alone. Maybe there were other things that could have been proven if this case had been approached differently. And my question is, if you really think that you can go into court, if you really think that you've got all the evidence you need to convince me or another juror that you have this guy dead to rights, then why do you have to lie? And why is everything still sealed, right? You would have all of the evidence. You would be able to walk in and do this all in a couple of days because you're like, bam, 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 we got him. But you have zero physical evidence. And for the very large part of this investigation, they had no body. So they have to rely on all this circumstantial evidence. And I just want to talk really quickly about what a lot of people keep coming in to say, if he didn't do it, then why was he running? Let's at least stick to the facts. He was arrested in San Diego near Torrey Pines Golf Course. So he was arrested not as he was trying to escape, but let's talk through that. There is so much circumstantial evidence, and of the things Scott had in his car, the change of the hair color, the goatee, like he can come up with 1,000,001 excuses why all of these things happened in this order. And he has, right? He continues to tell all these different stories and his family testifies to certain things. But let me say this. This was a gift to the prosecution. If they had bundled this correctly and gone in front of me as a juror, I might have been able to buy it. But let me just tell you something. I'm going to read something from DeStacio's opening statement. So as the prosecutor prosecuting this case, the person who's supposed to look straight at the jury and go, here's what you're going to hear. Here are the facts. Here is why this is absolutely irrefutable. This is why this guy did this. Let me read from his opening statement and you tell me if this exudes confidence. And these are direct quotes. So the opening, here's what he says. At the time he was arrested, he had almost $15,000 in cash on his person. Great sentence, probably should have stopped right there. But here's what he goes on to say. He had in, I think, one area, he had almost $10,000. And then somewhere else, like he had like 2,000 and 2,000, some denomination like that, like 14,000 something, almost $15,000. Now, I'm not here to mock anybody's communication skills or their presentation, but you're asking the jury to send this man to his death. And you don't even have the facts. You don't. You simply don't have the facts that you can give them right there in that moment in court. Now, I'm not a prosecutor, but here's exactly what I would have said. At the time of his arrest, Scott Peterson was found having $15,000 in and around his person. We found in the glove box of his car a bank envelope that had $10,100 in cash in it. In his personal wallet, which he carries in his back left pocket of his jeans, we found $480 in cash. In a black duffel bag that was placed on the floor in the back seat, we found another $2,346. In the trunk, there was a backpack that also contained some cash. It had $2,065 in it. And when we counted all of the loose change in the ashtrays, the cup holders, and other places around the car, we found $7.36. So for a grand total, Scott Peterson had on his person $14,998.36. That is how you prosecute somebody. You don't do this, well, like, I think he had about maybe 2,000 and then maybe 2,000. How am I supposed to believe you know what the fuck you're talking about if you can't even articulate it to me? Now, Garagos, in defense of this Scott was fleeing thing, he brought up the point that earlier in the investigation, Scott had been on business trips. So Scott had been to Mexico on a business trip. He went to Mexico and he came back. So if he'd really done anything wrong, why didn't he flee then? Why didn't he just stay in Mexico and never come home? And this is directly from Garagos's opening statement, where he said he had also just paid his car insurance. He paid his income taxes. He filed his 1040s, his income tax returns. He had not cashed his most recent paycheck. And as you saw yesterday, he had some children's books in his car when he was arrested. These were children's books for his nieces and nephews to give to them the following Sunday, which would have been Easter. And this is hardly the idea of a man who is preparing to flee. Based on what I've researched in the last 40 videos, I come to the conclusion that I do not think that the state put forth enough evidence or facts that I would have voted to convict him, especially if the death penalty is on the line. I feel that there's reasonable doubt. I would have had to vote to acquit. Doesn't say he didn't do it. He might have done it. But this case has a lot of holes. And for me, it's enough to be reasonable doubt.